We have seen in the part 2 till the search strategy, and now as you can see in the pictures, we have a lot of pieces that we have gathered from the search, and we have to join them together. This is our jigsaw puzzle, and we have to make sense out of it. So after we have run the search, the next comes the screening, right? So what is screening? It is a two-part process in which you determine whether each individual article meets your inclusion criteria, and therefore it should be included in your review or not. To reduce the bias, we should have minimum of 2 reviewers to screen the results, yourself and someone else from your team. So this is the screening, and the two stages of screening are first pass, that is title and abstract. This is where we examine titles and abstracts to remove obviously irrelevant material. At this stage, you may not need to provide a justification for your exclusions. The second pass is full text. This is where you examine the full text for compliance with your eligibility criteria, and at this stage you must provide reasons why you exclude certain articles or documents. How do we screen? After we have finished creating or building and developing our search, save it as the final version in each database that you identified in your protocol. Once you have them all ready to go, run each one and export all your results to EndNote using a separate group to store the results from each database. From EndNote, export your references and then import to Covidence to commence the screening. So we are talking about two different softwares here, EndNote and Covidence, and these help us in our performing the screening and other things very easily. So here we can see the Covidence on the screen and EndNote. This is how they look, and we have to make use of them while we are doing our systematic review. Once we have done this screening and we have certain set of articles ready with us. There is something called as critical appraisal which comes into picture. The critical appraisal skills enable you to assess the trustworthiness, the relevance and the results of published papers so that you can decide if they are believable and useful. The methodological quality is checked, internal and external validity and risk of bias of each and every article. There are certain tools which are available to measure the quality. The first is Amster's checklist. It is a measurement tool to assess methodological qualities of systematic review. And MECIR, that is the methodological expectations of Cochrane intervention reviews standards, specify methodological expectations for Cochrane protocols reviews and updates of reviews on the effects of intervention. So these checklists help us in critical evaluation and critical appraisal. Then there is something very important called as risk of bias assessment, and we have Cochrane risk of bias assessment tool, and this table has given the tool. Like on the left side we have types of biases: selection bias, performance bias, detection bias, attrition bias, reporting bias, and there is a description of the bias, and there is relevant domains in collaboration risk of bias tool, and this completes the table. So we have to see whether in that particular article if there is any bias, selection bias is there or not, whether any performance bias and so on. So this tool helps us to again critically appraise the article on the basis of risk. So when we analyze the particular study, and then we have to report it on the basis of risk of bias. So the risk of bias can be low, unclear or high. When it is a low risk of bias, the interpretation is that it is not a bias that will seriously alter the results. Unclear bias is that which raises some doubt about the results, and high risk of bias is the one that seriously weakens the confidence in the results. So this is how we have to interpret the findings, and this is the very important table as in terms of risk of bias assessment. Here in this you can see an example presentation of risk of bias assessments for studies in a Cochrane review of therapeutic monitoring of antiretroviral drugs in people with HIV. So you can see here that the studies are enlisted on the left side, and each important outcome, that is random sequence generation, allocation concealment and all those factors, they are graded as low, high, and unclear. And this is how finally we come to a conclusion whether there is, this evidence is credible or not credible for the scientific community. So this risk of bias assessment, there is a website called as riskofbias.info, and where the tools are available. As you can see on the screens, you can download and perform the assessment. Now comes the step of data extraction. The data extraction step is, the information that we extract from the studies included in your systematic review will depend on the purpose of your review and your review question, obviously. Only extract the data that is relevant to your particular systematic review question. It may happen the study may check various parameters, but our question is focused. So we need not go into details of the other parameters. We have to stay focused and specific to our own outcomes. Develop a data extraction worksheet and workbook as part of your protocol. This should include the key constructs you are interested in as part of your review. Your worksheet and workbook should be comprehensive enough that you should not have to go back to those studies. So our data sheet should include all the headings and the data has to be extracted so that we need not read the article again and again. Now checklist of items for data extraction. As you can see here, the items without parentheses should normally be collected in all reviews. Items in square brackets may be relevant to some reviews and not others. So here we can see source, eligibility, methods, participants, interventions, and various subtopics such as in source we have study ID, report ID, reviewer ID, citation and contact details. Then we have eligibility. So confirm eligibility for review and reason for exclusion. In methods, we have to mention study design, total study duration, sequence generation, allocation, sequence concealment, blinding, other concern about bias. In participants, you have to mention total number, setting, diagnostic criteria, and so on. So there are specific things that need to be extracted from the various studies and put it in one table so that at one glance we know what is there in all the studies. So this continues like for outcomes and results and miscellaneous. So including funding source, key conclusions, miscellaneous comments, references to other relevant studies, and so on. So all this data needs to be extracted point wise in a nice table format. Once we extract the relevant data, we have to do the assessment of the quality of evidence depending on the grade rating. So this grade rating, uh, if it is high, then we are very confident that the true effect lies close to that of the estimate of the effect. If it is moderate, we are moderately confident. If it is low, then our confidence in the effect estimate is limited, and if it is very low, then we have little confidence in the effect estimate. So true effect is likely to be substantially different from the estimated effect. So this is the great interpretation of strength recommendations for patients. If there are strong recommendations, then most individual in this situation would want the recommended course of action. And for clinicians, most individuals should receive this intervention. And for policymakers, the recommendation can be adopted as a policy. This is for strong recommendations. But if the recommendation is conditional, that means the quality of evidence is low or very low, then for patient, what does it mean? It means that majority of the individual in this situation would want the suggested course of action, but many would not. For clinician, it means that they should recognize different choices and that will be appropriate for individual patients, and that you must help each patient arrive at a management decision consistent with his or her own values and preferences. And for policymakers, the conditional recommendations mean that they need substantial debate and involvement of various stakeholders. So this is about strong recommendation and conditional recommendations and graders assessment of the quality of evidence. Now we have seen everything. We have seen in a nutshell. Now let us come to the process of registering a protocol. The registration of protocol helps to avoid duplication of work. You do not want anyone else to do the exact same review you are doing. Once you register your review, you will be available, the review will be available open access through their database. It will have a unique registration number, and this number can be cited in publications and reports to provide the link between your planned and completed review. This is recommended by Prisma and many publishers. These are international databases prospectively registered systematic review in health and social care. Now this database is free to search and very important that the review should have health related outcome. Only then it will get registered. Now let us come to the database. The first database is Cochrane. Uh, Archibald Cochrane was a Scottish doctor noted for his book Effectiveness and Efficiency, The Random Reflections on Health Services. This book advocated the use of randomized controlled trials to make medicine more effective and efficient. His advocacy of randomized controlled trial eventually led to the development of Cochrane Library Database of Systematic Review and establishment of the UK Cochrane Centre in Oxford and the International Cochrane Collaboration. He is considered to be originator of the idea of evidence-based medicine in the current era. Cochrane, previously known as the Cochrane Collaboration, was founded in 1993, is a British charity formed to organize medical research findings so as to facilitate evidence-based choices about health intervention. This includes 53 review groups that are based at research institutions worldwide. Cochrane has approximately 30,000 volunteer experts from around the world, and the group conducts systematic reviews of healthcare interventions and diagnostic tests and publishes them in the Cochrane Library. Now there is another database called as the Prospero, that is the International Prospective Registers of Systematic Reviews, better known as Prospero, the acronym. It is open access online database of systematic review protocols on health related topics. Researchers can choose to have their reviews prospectively registered with Prospero. It is produced by the Center of Reviews and Dissemination at the University of York in England and funded by National Institute for Health Research. Now, the data set for a registry of systematic reviews is a research question which includes patients and population, intervention, comparison and outcome, that is our PICO, a search strategy and date of execution of search, criteria for inclusion and exclusion, including types of participants, interventions, outcomes and studies, and a data set for registry of systematic reviews. They should also include the information about methods used to assess the risk of bias, method of analysis, anticipated start date, investigators, source of funding, competing interests of authors, date of registration. So all this should be handy when we are trying to get our review registered online. So review manager, there is something called as RevMan. It is Cochrane collaboration software for systematic review. For all steps including protocol writing, statistical analysis and editorial process, this helps us and it is free of cost. So RevMan we should try and use. There is another software called as Archi. It is a central database, stores all review published in and in progress along with contact information. It needs username and password. There is something called as a Cochrane handbook, which is very important and should be there with all of the investigators who are doing systematic review. It has various sections and various tools that are important in the systematic review process. Now, can the review be funded? Yes, but then there are conditions apply. There are various institutes which fund the systematic review like 3I, that International Initiative for Impact Evaluation, Campbell Collaboration, the NIHR, but all these need a very stringent protocol and very high level of background work to be done, and the impact of that review has to be very high in terms of the health of the community. So yes, funding is possible, not impossible, but very not very commonly given for postgraduate students, but definitely we can try to get one. There are other useful resources such as ADA Center for Evidence-Based Dentistry, where I have talked about, taken an example earlier. So in these resources, we can see that how they have appraised the evidence and how they have given clinical recommendation. And this will definitely help us in making informed treatment choices for our patients. Now what? So the last bit is, after you have seen this, what is a systematic review, how it is important, how it is done in a nutshell. Now the next step is to prepare yourself, read and decide the area of your interest. Unless you are interested in that area, this extremely exhaustive work is not possible. You need to be intrinsically motivated. You need to decide the topic, whether it is in vivo, in vitro, and you need to decide whether you are going for registration or you are just going to conduct the review without registration. But I would recommend that it should be registered so that it helps us in the publication process as well.